And this is what you do at the beginning of each day. So the beginning of each day, open up your inbox, take a look at your goals, and then you say, what am I going to do today? Now I'm going to show you how I use my personal to-dos in Asana. So you go to this My Tasks tab up in the top left. Always have an inbox at the top. This is where when you email yourself, this is where it will go. First section I do is my quarterly goals. Here, we've got our date set to the end of the quarter. We've got our different quarterly goals. I categorize mine by client responsibility. These are all quarterly goals, so they're all high priority. Here's where you can see these are also listed in another project. So this is where this could be the same goal that you have in your weekly meeting with your team, but now you can see it here with everyone else. Just if you're sharing it with a different project, you just have to be careful not to check it off because it'll check it off for that project too. I break mine down into do now, do next, and backlog. Well, and someday maybe. I would recommend a book called Getting Things Done, which is in our reading list. So just go to the resources section, Prairie Founders Club. That book really kind of helped me clear my head up in all the different open loops in my head and just to get it down on paper. And the first principle is just to get all those loops in your head closed. And the way you close them is you just write them down somewhere. Every little open loop has to go down in your system. My system's Asana, but your system may be, a sheet of paper, it may be a spreadsheet, it may be your Apple to-dos, your Google to-dos, or whatever it is. But whatever it is, the first thing you do is just get everything in your head out. And it should fit into one of these sections. What I'm doing now, what I'm going to do next, backlog, and then someday maybe. One of the things that I also learned in getting things done is if it takes 2 minutes or less, just do it. Don't put it off. It takes less than 2 minutes because it takes less than 2 minutes to pick up a phone or write an email. The first thing I have is the due date. As you can see, this one's recurring, which is helpful. And so the way you do recurring is when you book it, the repeat is down here. And I can set that to recurring. So as I check that off, it'll just create a new one for next week. I've got my client responsibility here. I've got my action order here. So this is the order in which I want to attack my day. And this is what you do at the beginning of each day. So the beginning of each day, open up your inbox, take a look at your goals, and then you say, what am I going to do today? You want to check your backlogs, your do next and all that. But you really want to keep this do now to just things you can accomplish in one day. And now look, I'm already up to like 8 things, which is probably more than you want. You want to start with like 5 or less, but it grows over the day, doesn't it? But eventually, like if you get too many things on here, your head's gonna explode. So in the morning, try to keep this to about 5 things or less, and then just rank them. I'm gonna do this first, this second, this third, this fourth. Now notice the priority might be different than the action order. And this goes to a book by Covey, which is also in the reading list. Stephen Covey has 2 books that I recommend. One is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but habit 2 of the 7 habits is do first things first. There's a whole book on first things first. Habit 2, first things first. It starts with a quadrant. So if you can imagine a quadrant, which is on the top, it's how urgent is it, which means it's urgent or not urgent. And then there is important or not important. So if you think of things that are urgent and important, or urgent and not important, or they might be not urgent but important, and not urgent and not important. So if you think about that, what's not urgent, not important? That's like doom scrolling, scrolling through email. Basically, those are distractions and procrastinations, right? So we want to get those off the board. The next thing would be not important, but urgent. And that's what a lot of people and founders spend their day in, is things that seem urgent, but are not important. So these are distractions. So like emails you get from people that you don't need to respond to right away, phone calls, people bugging you for stuff, or just busy work that you find yourself doing that's not necessarily helping you advance one of your quarterly goals. So those things you want to keep off your list. So now we go to important. Important and urgent obviously needs to be done first, right? These are things that are both important, meaning could be tied to income, tied to your status, or like keeping customers happy. And there's a big deadline coming up. So obviously you want to do those first. You want to get out of a world where all you're doing is important and urgent, right? And the way you do that is you start working on things that are important but not urgent. That's what he calls Q2, Quadrant 2 in Stephen Covey's First Things First. Q2 items are the things that people tend to put off and procrastinate, meaning they're not urgent because they're maybe a longer term goal, like a quarterly goal, So maybe it's a bigger project and it's not due tomorrow, but you don't want to wait until it's urgent. You don't want to wait till it's the last minute, right? So what you want to do is you want to find time in your day to work on things that are important but not urgent. And that's how you start chipping away at that always putting out fires type mentality. And so I like to put in here an urgency here, urgent or not urgent. I don't necessarily have anything in here that's not urgent. So like for example, booking a guest is not urgent. It's not like I'm going to lose a client over it, but it's important, right? You can put an important or not important in here. To me, if it's on this list, it's important. I like to just do priority list. So here's where you can list your priorities. And I guess I started this conversation by pointing out that you can have a difference in priority and action order. So even though obviously my number one priority thing I've got is my first action order item, and they generally follow the list, but they don't necessarily have to. Like you can have a top priority thing that's not due today, and so you may not do that first, right? So that's why there's a difference between action and priority. The other thing I would say is if you're just getting started, don't overwhelm yourself with all of these different options. Um, I'm kind of a sicko and I like all this detail, but for if you're just starting with this could be overwhelming to you. Maybe just start with the different sections and not worry about priority order and all that stuff. That may be too much for you to get started. All right, so we've gone through in the morning, we looked at our inbox, we went through our goals, we selected the top 5 things for do now. I got a couple of items during the day here, and then you start working your to-do list. Now, anything that doesn't fit in here goes in do next. And some of these things were scheduled as do now, and then they just didn't happen, right? Or it got put off. So some of these still have action orders. And notice like it's a pain in the butt if you've got a system like this to have everything have an independent number. So I kind of get to a point where it's like action order 1 things are kind of like, these are things you should do first, right? Obviously you can't do 6 things first, but these are, when they jump up, these are candidates for action order 1. That's a way to look at it. So now you've got do now. And so typically do now is doing what you're doing today. Do next is what you hit if you finish your to-do list, or it's also where you pull tomorrow. When you start looking at your list tomorrow, you pull from do next. And then backlog are things that you haven't gotten around to yet. And this is kind of the things that you're looking to do in the next week or so, or couple weeks. And then someday maybe is where you don't really have a time frame. I've got some stuff for follow-ups, adding Google Tag Manager to my site. These are basically like not urgent, not that important, right? And then you might have a done category. So like, for example, let's say you're not checking off your to-dos. Let's say I had a to-do that was part of my L10. So let's say it was in my marketing L10. And then here you can actually pick the section. So let's say this was part of my to-dos for the marketing L10. And I got this call done, but I don't want to check it off because I want to check it off during the meeting. What you can just do is move it to your done section. And that way it's off of your list. And then you can check it off together at the meeting. So that's the done section. I like to have a reference section. This is where I keep like meeting notes, recovery codes, checklists, that sort of thing. Here's a list of KPIs that are actually KPIs from my L10, mileage and expenses, random stuff. But like really the crux of this training is right here. You just want your goals, do now, do next, backlog someday maybe. Have that on your phone, email yourself to-dos, and that's how I get it done.